Now, I know last season, in the eyes of the national sports media and by a result, a lot of sports fans, the two elite teams of the National Football League were the Seattle Seahawks and the Denver Broncos. And I was never in that camp. I always thought at some point in time, even if it maybe got all the way up to the Super Bowl, the Broncos were going to be exposed as a very one dimensional football team. My thought most of the season, if not all of the season, that the two best teams in the NFL both played in the NFC and were both in the NFC West. That was, of course, the eventual Super Bowl champion Seattle Seahawks and the team that, frankly, if they would have made it to the Super Bowl, probably would have steamrolled the Denver Broncos in a similar fashion, and that is the San Francisco 49ers. Here's a team that's now, in the past 3 seasons, been to 3 straight NFC championship games, came this close to potentially winning Super Bowl 47, and they seem poised again in 2014 to make another long, deep run in the playoffs and be a team that is viewed as one of the elite teams in the National Football League. Last season, they go 12-4. They make it to the NFC Championship game. They come this close to beating Seattle in that NFC Championship game, and I mean this close. It was interesting to say the least. And to me, those were the two best teams in the National Football League all year long. So I was wondering with the San Francisco 49ers, was this going to be a busy off season? Was this going to be an off season where they kind of, kept it even keel? Were they going to make big moves? Were they going to lose some big pieces? And they made some nice moves and they didn't really lose a whole lot, even though some might disagree with me and say they lost quite a bit, especially from that secondary. They brought in Antoine Bethea. They brought in Chris Cook. You can say what you want about that, but Bethea was a nice replacement for the loss of Dante Whitner. They drafted Jimmy Ward in the first round out of NIU. They brought in guys like Carlos Hyde in the second round out of Ohio State to be another back in that backfield behind Frank Gore. They did lose guys like Carlos Rogers and Terrell Brown, but frankly, Carlos Rogers isn't the same Carlos Rogers that he once was. And Terrell Brown was definitely nothing of the special variety. Bigger problem for the 49ers this offseason, I think, was that they've had some distractions. You have the whole debacle that is Aldon Smith and all of his crap. You've got key players, most notably Navarro Bowman and Upati, coming back from major injuries. You've got all of these things factored in. You have some of the controversy around Colin Kaepernick, and now they've re-signed him long term. So a kind of tumultuous offseason for a 49ers organization that maybe didn't need it, but at the same token, at the same point in time, almost seems in a way to kind of thrive off of it. And maybe that's a reflection of their head coach, Jim Harbaugh. And maybe that works for them. I'm not really sure. But I think 2014 is really going to be that shit or get off the pot year for the 49ers. They've been close so many times. At some point in time, you either do it or you don't. And then when you don't do it, you drop off the face of the earth dramatically and things get very ugly and very quickly. And at some point in time, I anticipate that happening for the San Francisco 49ers. And ironically enough, I would not be that surprised if it actually happened this upcoming season. Now, heading into this season, though, to me, on paper, this still looks like one of the elite teams in the NFC. You're talking about a team with a hell of an offensive line, first round picks from the past like Joe Staley and Anthony Davis and Mike Upati. This is really one of the best offensive lines in the National Football League that really, helps with the offensive identity that Jim Harbaugh has tried to establish with this organization. He loves to have those power running formations, and he has to have that offensive line in order to make it work. This is still a unit defensively that is driven by the linebackers. There is no question about it. The guys like the Aldon Smiths and the Ahmad Brooks, and inside with Patrick Willis, and hopefully returning to health Navarro Bowman. Even if one or two of those guys struggles or misses time, this is still a linebacker unit with some depth, a linebacker unit that can still make some plays. And like I said, is the strength of that 49ers defense. And I think in general, when talking about the strengths of the 49ers as a whole, you look at the team depth. This is a team that's had a lot of draft picks and had a lot of those kind of red shirt year type of gamble picks. This is a team that's deep in a lot of places and a team that can survive some of the rigors and grind of an NFL season, whereas if they lose players at this position or that position, they can plug in some replacements and they really don't skip a beat. Now, looking ahead to some potential question marks, and I think some big ones for 2014, you look at the cornerback position. Your secondary as a whole. Yes, Eric Reed played very nicely last year. Yes, you brought in Antoine Bethea. You've got Jimmy Ward there. But those are all safeties. Is one of them going to play corner? Are you going to play three safeties all the time? Who's going to play the corner position? Who's going to be able to match up against some of the better receivers in the NFL? In that 49ers secondary? I think that's a huge question for them. And it's a clear area of difference between them and, let's say, their divisional opponents, the Seattle Seahawks. You look at the health of some of their key players, and most notably a guy like a Navarro Bowman. You look at the behavior of certain other players, namely an Aldon Smith. They cannot afford to lose Aldon Smith for an extended period of time because he really provides a lot of necessary pass rush for that 49ers 3-4 defense. If he's out for an extended period of time due to bad behavior, it could spell some trouble for this 49ers defense. They need Willis to be healthy for an entire season. Health, behavior, these are critical things. And also the question mark to me for the 49ers is, are they going to be able to take the next step? Will they have the ability to take the next step? Because, they've been there for the past few seasons and they've been this close. But at some point in time, like I mentioned, you've either got to do something to take that next step or you don't. And I think the single biggest key to them taking the next step is to see that next level of growth and improvement in Colin Kaepernick as now their long-term franchise quarterback. If he can improve his play, especially as being more than a one read and run quarterback in the passing game, then it opens up the possibilities and the options for the 49ers on offense, and it opens up things for the team as a whole, and I think will help them to be able to take that next step. Looking ahead to their schedule in 2014, they've got the AFC West, they've got the NFC East, they've got Chicago, they've got New Orleans. Not the most difficult meat grinding schedule in the world. You look at some of the home games and some of the away games, and to a degree, I don't want to sit there and say that it seems like the schedule makers rigged things for the San Francisco 49ers. But at the same token, it sure looks like they got a lot of breaks when it comes to the schedule makers. You look at some of their home games in terms of the non-divisional games. They get Chicago at home. They get Philadelphia at home. They get Kansas City at home. They get Washington at home. They get San Diego at home. You're talking about 3 of those 5 teams made the playoffs last year, and they get those teams coming to them. And a lot of people are expecting Washington and Chicago to be improved in 2014. They get them at home too, whereas opposed to their away games, you go to Dallas, to Denver, to New Orleans, to the Giants, and to Oakland. You might say, well, going to Denver and going to New Orleans isn't easy, and that is very true. But a couple of seasons ago, the 49ers did beat New Orleans at the Superdome. And you look at it going to Dallas, going to New York, going to Oakland, those are not the toughest obstacles, needless to say. Like I said, it seems like at worst, they got a big, nice break from the schedule makers this season. Some of their keys to success is, first and foremost, Colin Kaepernick. He's got to become that guy. He's got to take that next step. He's got to become more than a one read and run quarterback. He's got to be a guy that could stand tall as a pocket passer, that could do more than just make a lot of big plays with his feet. He has to make some big plays with his arm. And sometimes, frankly, he needs to make that solid, consistent play with his arm. They need some of this young depth that we've heard about for the past couple of seasons to start contributing. They need guys like Marcus Lattimore to play well, Lemonnier to play well, Tank Carradine to play well. Some of these other guys that they've recently drafted, guys like Quentin Patton, guys like Bruce Ellington. And they need a lot of these different pieces, these guys that we've heard about, talking about how impressive the 49ers depth has been. Well, it looks nice, but at some point in time, you've got to get more out of them. And they need to stay focused and on track. Because like I said, there are some things that make me feel like this team is ready to strike. They're poised to become that team in 2014. But on the flip side, this is a team that seems like they're this close to teetering on the edge, which sometimes you have to in this situation. But they're teetering on the edge where they could fall off the tracks and it could all go steamrolling downhill very quickly. They got to behave off the field. They got to stay healthy on the field. They've got to stay focused and committed and stand behind Jim Harbaugh and his message and his vision and his direction. Ultimately, I do think that the San Francisco 49ers will be able to stay on course at least for 2014, and I expect them to take another step. I expect them to win the NFC West and win it somewhat comfortably. I think similar to the Seattle Seahawks last year, they'll win somewhere around 13 games, and they'll probably end up with home field advantage throughout the NFC playoffs.